Chris Knopp from Friends of the Boundary Waters, their executive director, is here with us today on the DFL Daily. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you so much for having me.
So, the first question I have for you is kind of simple, but there are a lot of people watching this who may have never been to the Boundary Waters themselves. Please tell us, describe for us what the Boundary Waters is like, why it's such a special place, why you've invested so much of your life in protecting them.
It is an absolutely magical place. It is over 1 million acres of wilderness where you have rocky granite shorelines, crystal clear, clean water, soaring red and white pine trees and birch trees and cedar trees. You can see moose and hear wolves and sometimes see wolves. You can catch walleye and smallmouth bass. It's a place that it brings people closer to one another too. So it's not just all the wildlife and the clean water. It's the impact it has on you individually and also the family and friends that you're with. So it brings people together and really creates those bonds that last a lifetime. It's the impact that being exposed to that wilderness where you put the phones away and clears your mind and makes those connections lasting, that makes it so meaningful for generations of people.
Absolutely. Chris, you've dedicated so much of your career to environmental conservation and have been leading this work for years. Can you share a bit about your own path and what drew you to protecting places like the Boundary Waters?
Sure. I did not grow up in Minnesota. I was born outside of Cleveland. I grew up outside of Cleveland, Ohio. And so I always loved to roam the woods and catch fish and play outside. But I also from the place where the has a city where the river caught fire. And so that was part of my heritage was being from the city where the river caught fire. And I would spend summers, a couple weeks each summer in Western Michigan, where I had some family, and I'd fish on this pier. And right across from the pier was a beautiful lake. Hooker Chemical, the same company that gave us Love Canal, had a big facility there. And was as I was fishing with my two brothers and sister on the pier, was dumping poisons into the water that would go right by the pier where we were fishing. And so the beauty of the outdoors and the connection to the outdoors is always so powerful to me, but also the fragility and that the consequence of not protecting it were made very tangible to me as a child. And so I moved into I practiced environmental law, and then I moved into land conservation, and I moved here about 20 years ago and became the executive director of Friends of the Boundary Waters about 9 years ago. And my first experience with the Boundary Waters was when I still lived in Ohio, and I brought my young kids up there, and I was in a bad mood. Truthfully, I was not my best self. A long drive from Cleveland to out to Ely, Minnesota, and we set up the tent. It was at a Y camp, and then I went outside to get some fresh air, and I saw the Northern Lights, and I didn't know exactly what it was, it was just so extraordinary, and so it kind of grounded me, and that was the inspiration for my connection to the Boundary Waters. That this is such an amazing, special place, and warrants protection for everyone.
You know, Friends of the Boundary Waters has been doing this work to protect the Boundary Waters really since the Boundary Waters Protection Act came into place. Can you talk a bit about how that legislation came about and what your organization's been doing ever since?
Sure. Friends of the Boundary Waters, we were founded 50 years ago, actually 50 years ago on May 7th. So that's our official origin birthday. And we were founded at Toby's Diner in Hinckley, Minnesota, where people came together kind of in a middle spot between the Twin Cities and the Duluth area. And we're actually going to have a celebration on May 7th that everyone's welcome to, a founder's breakfast at 10 a.m. on Thursday, May 7th. So put that on your calendar. And it was ordinary people of all backgrounds that came together. That there was a law passed in 1964, the Wilderness Act, that put in place protections for wilderness areas. But for the Boundary Waters, it's kind of a wilderness in name only. You can still do logging in the wilderness areas, and there weren't the protections that were put in place. So quite literally, ordinary people came together at Toby's and founded a movement, and that's Friends of the Boundary Waters. And so that led to passage of the 1978 Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness Act that enshrines the protections that make the Boundary Waters what it is today. And ever since then, in those 5 decades, we've been protecting the boundary water, standing on the shoulders of our founders that were, teachers, stay-at-home moms, some lawyers, and just people who love the outdoors.
One of the things we hear a lot about is concerns around copper nickel sulfide mining in the watershed of the boundary waters. Can you describe to folks who may not be familiar with what a watershed is and how and why that's so concerning for folks who want to protect the boundary waters?
Sure. Minnesota has is its heritage is clean water, and so we have there's really three that we're so lucky we have in Minnesota waters that go north into Canada. We have waters that go into the Great Lakes, and then waters that go into the Mississippi and down to the Gulf of Mexico. And so what we have with this type of copper nickel sulfide mining, it's not Minnesota's traditional mining. So what's different about this mining is that there's sulfide in the ore, and when that's broken up, you create sulfuric acid. And so that's what's different. So you can swim in an old iron pit. You can't swim in a tailings basin from a copper nickel sulfide mine. And what with the sulfuric acid in the water, it kills wild rice. It brings heavy metals out into the water, especially mercury, and so it's a different type of mining. And here, with all that granite shield in the boundary waters, the sulfuric acid and the pollution gets into the water system, and then it goes through a network of lakes. So they're all interconnected, and so it's not as if the pollution can be contained. It goes throughout a whole system that damages it for the thousands of people that use it each year and the thousands of people whose jobs are dependent upon clean water.
All right, so this episode is going to be airing on Earth Day. Is there any action that you want people? Our DFL Daily is attended by activists throughout the state, and they're doers. They're people who want to build things. What do you want them to do to help protect the boundary waters?
Sure. There are two things. On Earth Day, April 22nd at 10 a.m., we will have a rally at the Minnesota State Capitol. So please join us there. It's a clean water rally. We'll celebrate the boundary waters. We'll talk about how we'll fight back against what happened in Washington, D.C. last week. And then we have an affiliate, Friends of the Boundary Waters Action Network, that does political work, which is very key to, intertwine with what the DFL does. And so we have an event on April 23rd, the day after Earth Day, at Minneapolis Cider from 5 to 7. So we'll get together with people who understand the importance of politics and how that interrelates to passing good laws.
Awesome. We'll mention both of these on our DFL Daily and make sure people are aware of them. Thank you, Chris Knopp, for being our special guest today on the DFL Daily.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you so much for having me.